Welcome to A Few Good People podcast, where we shine a light on crime and corruption in North Carolina, giving voice to victim stories. Our hosts, Donna Few, Kim Shepard, and myself, Brooklyn Vance, are dedicated to uncovering the truth and seeking justice for those who have been wronged. Donna, a victims advocate and founder of Mountain Justice on Facebook, understands the struggles faced by victims seeking accountability and closure. Kim's journey as a victim adds depth and authenticity to our discussions, highlighting the human toll of systemic failures. This is episode 2 of season 1, The Newman Chronicles. Today's story is more Newman adjacent, as it occurred before he became the district attorney, but nevertheless, you will hear Newman's name come up in this episode and his refusal to do his job. Today's story is heartbreaking. Trigger warning, we will be discussing the death of a child. Barbara Rogers' son, Michael Scott Rogers, was murdered at the age of 16 in 2010. Only one of his murderers ever served time for killing Michael. He served less than 2 years. Some of the audio in this episode can be a little hard to hear. We are brand new to this, so sorry in advance for that.
So thank you for joining us on our podcast, A Few Good People. I'm here with our host. I'm Kim.
I'm Donna.
I'm Brooklyn.
And we wanted to start this podcast because of all the injustices and the corruption that has been happening in North Carolina. Donna had started Mountain Justice back in 2014. We'll get to her story later on about the corruption and the murders of her children. But today we have our guest, Barbara Rogers. Her son was murdered back in 2010, and she's going to tell us her story. And can you just tell us just a little bit about Michael? We know he was 16, and I know you had mentioned that he loved sports and was really good at football.
He loved his nieces and nephews, and he played with them. He was outgoing. He loved to camp. He loved to fish. He loved to ride motorcycles or dirt bikes.
Just a fun-loving 16-year-old.
Typical.
A sweet boy with lots of friends.
Yes, he did.
And with lots of life left to live.
Yes, he did.
I know this is very difficult, beyond difficult, and I want you just to take your time and just tell us what happened that day back in 2010.
Okay, it was a Saturday night at 10:52. Michael called and wanted to talk to my ex-husband. So I put it on speakerphone, and he wanted him to come and get him. He didn't want me to know or his father to know that he needed him to come and get him. And then the phone disconnected, and he called right back. And he still wasn't sure where he was, but he had someone get on the phone to tell Robbie where to meet him at. Scott Fisher was the one that got on the phone, said that there were people there that didn't want him there, and they had just met Michael and wanted to help him out, and he could get into the Blantyre church. We left going there to meet them, and they never showed up. On the way to meet them, Michael called me one last time, and he was upset, and he said, "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They've done beat the hell out of me. I'm laying here hurt in a pool of blood, and I just pray to God they don't come back and kill me." And I heard voices in the background, and Michael got quiet, and I heard ruffling of his jacket or something, and I heard him yell as they were pulling him away from the phone, like he had no energy. And then the phone went dead, and I had no more contact with him.
So let's back up. So you said that he was at a party, and he was at Scott Fisher's house. Is that where the party took place?
Yes.
And along with Scott Fisher, there was also another man there, Coley Hall.
Coley Hall.
And what was believed to have happened at that time in the house? There was a fight that had broke out with Michael and those men.
Earlier, there was a fight that broke out between Richard Thomas and Michael. And then I guess he was the one that didn't want Michael there. But then Coley and Scott got in the fight, and they stomped him in the head with boots. Ashley Palmer was trying to stop him. Michael was going in and out of consciousness. A neighbor had been contacted by Sean, Scott Fisher's dad, and asked him if there had been a party there because the sheriff's department had called them. And he said yes, and he told them that he needed to get Michael away from there. So instead of taking them to the bridge or to the church, they took him to the bridge about a half mile away to the pig field and to the boat access. They beat him to get him out of the car. They beat him all around the car. They left him there with no shirt in 20 degrees weather. They took his cell phone, and all 5 of them should have been charged in his homicide, but only one was charged and no one else.
Who was the one that was charged?
Scott Fisher.
Scott Fisher.
Did you say all 5 of them were charged?
She said all 5 of them should have been charged.
5, including the 2 girls? Is that the 5?
That's what Greg Newman told me.
And who are the 3?
Scott Fisher, Coley Hall, so it been 4.
So they had taken him to a hog lot and put him out there and left him there for dead. And you were out searching for him, trying to figure out where he was because he was not at the church like they had said that they were going to meet you there.
No.
At that time, had the police been called or anything like that?
Yes, on my way down, I called the sheriff's department to tell them what we were driving, what was going on, and then we were going to get Michael and for where we're supposed to go. And we all stayed there until 3 o'clock that morning. And then they sent us home and I guess continued to look for him, and found him at noon the next day, half a mile away in a pig pasture.
So after they dropped him off at the pig pen or the pig lot, what did they do after that?
They left him there.
Where did they go?
They continued to party.
What did they do with their clothes? Didn't they take their clothes and...
I was told that they took their clothes and burned them at Scott Fisher's dad's cabin.
And so when they left there, they went to Coley Hall's house.
After they left Scott Fisher's house and Michael down there, they went to party. But they had went by supposedly another person's house that said that they had burnt their clothes.
Okay.
And that their mother had came down there, Coley Hall's mom, and she told them they needed to go to the beach and get their story straight. She was never called as any kind of witness or anything.
So did they go party after they left?
They went up there, but I believe the law was right kind of behind them because they had found out that they had been at the bridge access instead of where they had told them they had dropped them off. And they went up there and found the blood in the car and blood around the car, and took them all to the Transylvania Sheriff's Department and got all their statements, which they lied, and kind of put off the timeline Michael would need to be checked on. And they waited until he died.
So they took him to the sheriff's department to question him before they even found Michael?
Yes.
And do you think that's how they found out where Michael was, when they were questioning him at the sheriff's department and they knew how to go find him?
No, I don't think that they, Scott Fisher, I don't think he agreed with going down there, but they had backup saying that they saw his tail light where he hit a post down there and an oil spill. And that was the same oil spill and the same tail light that was knocked off the Jetta that they had drove. That's how they found the car and knew that Michael had been down there instead of at 64 and the end of Holiday Inn Drive.
So the police found him the next day at noon, right? And did they call you right away?
No, I was in the car with the highway patrol when they found his body.
Weren't there dogs that kept Michael warm in the pig pen all night long?
there were two dogs that were standing over him, and when one of the gentlemen went to jump the fence, they came after him. So the animals kept all the livestock as
They were
stuff away
protecting
from
him
Michael.
from the
Because
from the
pigs
hogs.
are known to eat
Mhm.
anything that falls in their pen.
Right.
Mhm.
After that, after they found Michael, was anybody arrested?
No, it was 7 months of petitioning Jeff Hunt's office to make arrest in the case or to answer the family's questions to why none's been. 7 months later, Scott Fisher was arrested with involuntary manslaughter.
Was anybody else arrested?
No.
So only Scott Fisher was arrested.
Yes.
And did Scott Fisher spend time in jail?
Yes, 19 to 24 months.
So when you went in and talked to the DA, as you moved forward, and you saw that Coley Hall and nobody else was going to be charged for what had happened, which DA did you talk to?
Jeff Hunt, he was the DA during that time, and he met with Michael and his father and told us that that Scott Fisher would be the only one charged, and that was the only explanation he gave us. He was the only one. Scott Fisher was the only one being charged. So when he went to circuit judge in 2013, I went to Greg Newman and talked to Greg Newman and told him about the case. And Michael's dad and I went and talked to him, and he was the one that said that all the ones in the car should have been charged if the truth would be known, but he can't go back after all these years and try to fix something that has been messed up in the past. That he would look at Michael's file again, which he never did because I never heard anything from him.
Although there's no statute of limitations on murder.
Exactly. And then when Greg Newman got threw out, I went to Murray. I went to Murray and was going to tell him my story. Went with a few people, and they listened to one, and then they listened to another. And when it came to me, he told me he wasn't listening to anything I had to say. That two DAs had already looked at the case, and that he didn't see no point looking at it again.
Well, myself and Donna were present, as you know, in that meeting, and the way that you were treated so unfairly. You weren't even able to start your story, none whatsoever. He didn't even give you the opportunity to speak.
No.
He had showed his authority and pretty much showed you the door.
Here I'm inserting a clip of Barbara speaking with Andrew Murray, who is the 42nd Prosecutorial District Attorney of North Carolina. This is how dismissive he is of Barbara's case and Barbara's evidence and her file.
My son was murdered in 2010. And I wrote this because I figured I'd jump around if I didn't. My name is Barbara Rogers in Transylvania County. I'm the mother of Michael Scott Rogers. A 16-year-old was invited to a party on Holiday Drive here in Transylvania County. On February the 20th, my son was severely beaten by Richard Thomas, Scott Fisher, and Michael Coleman Hall. There were several that witnessed this beating, but no one intervened. Then Coley Hall, Scott Fisher, and two females took Michael to an isolated area. Michael called me one last time to tell me he was sorry. He was bleeding all over and he prayed that they wouldn't come back and kill him. Michael then got very quiet on the phone. I heard voices in the distance coming closer. I heard Michael's phone rustling and I heard him yell like he was out of energy as they dragged him away from his phone and it disconnected. Coley Hall and Scott Fisher began to beat Michael more. This was before they left him. Hit Michael while he was in the car to get him out. Hit him with rocks. They left Michael in 20-degree weather without a shirt on, severely beaten. Michael was found the next day around noontime dead in a hog pasture. The autopsy stated it was homicide. After 11 months petitioning Jeff Hunt to make arrest or to answer the family's questions to why none's been charged, Scott Fisher was charged with involuntary manslaughter. The others involved in Michael's beating and death were never charged. The trial went to court in 2012. Scott Fisher was found guilty and sentenced to 19 to 24 months, only doing 19. There were also 2 witnesses at the trial who waited to be called to the stand to testify, in which the other 2 individuals, to testify and naming the other 2 individuals, however they were never called to the stand. When
Let me stop you there. There was only one person charged, right? That was the person in trial?
Yes.
Okay. But witnesses for a trial would only be called for the purposes of that specific person on trial.
They did call witnesses for him.
But they didn't call 2 witnesses that you would have liked to have been called.
Yeah, because they named more than one person in the murder. They've seen it all happen.
But they would never do that because it doesn't help for that specific case. Do you understand? If they
An eyewitness to a murder don't help a case?
They convicted on what they charged with. I'm not telling you they charged correctly. I'm not telling you, but those 2 witnesses become superfluous if they're not going to help specifically for that. And apparently they thought they had enough to convict, and they did. Okay, and that's calls that are made every day. We had 3 witnesses this week on a domestic violence. All of them witnessed the same thing. After 2 witnesses got on the stand, the prosecutor did not call a 3rd witness because they felt like they'd already done enough to make that case.
They didn't want to deal with a gang killing.
With a what?
A gang killing.
Well,
Jeff Hunt was going out of
well,
office.
that may be.
during that time.
I mean, I hear what you're telling me that
quick.
people weren't charged.
He wanted a quick situation to that.
Okay.
But anyway, Greg Newman took office. I went to him with Michael's case. He assured me he would talk to the SBI, Tom Amos, and David Mahoney about the case because he hadn't heard of it. After 2 weeks, I called him back. He said he'd looked at the file and he thought that all in that car should have been charged. But Jeff Hunt was the one prosecuting when he was DA. He told me if I had new evidence or evidence that wasn't brought up in the trial, he may proceed, which was 2 witnesses. I explained to him there were 2 witnesses that was never called to testify. I found that he was just blowing me off. Michael's father and I met with Newman to discuss the case, to have answers about why the case hadn't proceeded. He agreed with everything Michael's father and I said, but because he didn't exceed in the Edna Glaze case, he didn't want to go back and try to fix what Jeff had done in his office. I told him that he could talk to the SBI, Tom Amos, and David Mahoney because they recommended manslaughter on Coley Hall and Scott Fisher. And Coley Hall he was just as guilty as Scott Fisher. And I've also got a thing from a wrongful death suit. It's second amendment and stated complaint where my attorney is talking about what happened, and he's got the files. He's went through them.
Were you successful in that against the other 2?
No, I went pro bono, and about after 8 years, I ain't heard nothing. I think he ran out of money. He was telling me he didn't have enough money to file and all this, and I had no money to pay.
Well, again, Barbara, it is 2021, and I apologize for communications that you probably will never be happy with, but as the new prosecutor after 2 other prosecutors, I'm not going to back and review that matter, I have to tell you.
So 2 witnesses don't make any difference when they seen who beat my kid and who left him to die. They were never called.
DAs make decisions. They were the properly elected DAs at the time, looking at evidence and reviewing. And I know you're going to be, I'm just telling you bluntly that I am not going to go back and pull a 2010 when 2 DAs have reviewed that case and someone was actually convicted from that. And now I'm not going to make you happy, but
no, when
that's
2
not a
killed my
review.
son and only one was convicted, and they say, well, we can't convict the other murderer that's walking around here just because.
Every time a new DA comes into office does not mean that there's a watershed event that you can go back years and years and years and bring back everybody that's dissatisfied with cases. I have to tell you, because that line would be out the door and around the buildings.
Well,
right?
for one, these kids are still in their 20s, and for 2, there's witnesses that was not brought into trial that names these people who did this to him.
You're talking about a 2010 case and decisions were
Well,
made.
30 years from now, I could have this case solved because I watch TV. I know there's no statutory limits on murder. I know I could get this done in 20 years if I find the right person that will actually go in and look at my evidence.
Okay.
I'm not giving up. I'll do it until I'm dead. It's my
appreciate
son.
that.
He was 16 years old.
I
He
appreciate that.
called me for help.
I appreciate that.
And then the murder is not charged. I need somebody to look at that file because I know that Greg Newman did not look at that file or he'd have seen the witness statement in that file, two of them. He did not look at that file and he did not talk to David Mahoney or the SBI because I called him and asked. Greg Newman didn't do nothing. He didn't look at the file. He didn't call anybody, even the SBI that was on the case. In Transylvania County, David Mahoney, he never called him and asked them nothing because I'm sure they would be very willing to tell them what happened in their investigation. And I got their investigation police report right here.
I'm not gonna,
Still getting nowhere.
I
That's fine. I've only done this 11 years. I'll keep doing it another 11 or another 20 or another 30 because I know there's no statute of limitation on a murder, and I think two witnesses could bring that up. Two witnesses that seen them beat my son and leave him there to die and him begging them to help him. I can't let that go. I'm his mother, and I don't care if it's been 10 years, 12 years, or 15.
I'm not.
I understand that. I understand that you can't do nothing. But I also know that there'll probably be DAs again, and I'll keep going to each one of them until somebody actually looks at my file. That's all I want. Somebody look at my file and not lie to me and say they did when they did not.
So,
And that's why Greg Newman's not here, because all the lies and everything else he's done. So if this is all a meeting and I'm not going to get nowhere and you're not even going to look at my stuff, then I think I need to leave. So you're not going to look at that file.
Well, there's no amount of saying that we're sorry or anything that we can really convey as to what your heartache has been for all these years. And we thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we just want everybody out there to know, no mother, nobody should lose a child, but to lose a child to murder is the most devastating way to lose a loved one. And then in your case, to not have the justice that Michael deserved.
It would be nice if Richard Coley Hall had charges on him
Mm-hmm.
for the part he played. Was just as important as the part Scott.
What part did he play, Barbara?
He drove the car. He was the one that drove the car down there.
Did he beat him up too?
He beat him up. Him and Scott Fisher both.
So did he do anything differently than Scott Fisher did?
No, except Scott Fisher drove away. Coley drove him down there and Scott drove him away. But they both beat him.
Is there anything that listeners can do to support you or to help you get Michael's story out there?
Keep sharing this story. Keep the case alive. Really research it. Parents need to be involved with their children. Just because someone asks you to be friends on social media does not mean they really want to be your friend. So you can't trust everything they say. And I would like to see arrests made that should have been made then. That's the only kind of closure I want to get at this point in time.
Well, I have the definition for involuntary manslaughter.
Oh, did you want to read that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So involuntary manslaughter is the crime of killing another human being unlawfully but unintentionally. So do you think they intentionally tried to kill him or it was unintentional?
I believe it was intentional.
What was the cause of death? Was it from him being...
Hypothermia,
And
but forced trauma.
blunt force trauma?
But they
And
also
hypothermia.
put on his death certificate homicide, correct?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And at the very least, it was like their actions that even if it was just hypothermia and there wasn't the like blunt force trauma, it was because of their actions.
Right.
That he.
Well, that was kind of voluntary.
Well, he didn't even
Yeah.
have.
It was like
drugs in
voluntary
his
for them
system.
to leave him. Yeah, it was. So there was like, it. To me, involuntary manslaughter is
Like if you kill somebody in a car accident. Yeah, but you don't beat
Needs to
them
be
up
charged.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
move them and then
move
drive them and dump
yeah,
them.
and dump them. Yeah.
Mhm.
And because I don't think that Michael would have died had they, even if they beat him up, had they immediately told somebody where he was at, and he could have gone, like someone could have gone and gotten him help.
If they, instead of them saying at the end of their driveway and then waiting on the dad to call the son, and the son call the dad back, the dad call the cops and say, no, he was let out on 64. 30, 45 minutes passed and Michael was laying out there in that field.
How do you feel like the cops handled this investigation?
Transylvania County, I think, handled it well, but they did no kind of charges. They didn't do any assault on a minor, inflicting bodily harm. They didn't charge him with obstruction of justice.
So how do you think that's doing pretty well?
How do I think what?
You said Transylvania cops did pretty well. How's that doing pretty well? If they didn't charge anybody, that's their job.
Well, because that is true. And I did want to take out charges on Coley Hall and Richard Thomas for assault. But David Mahoney and Mackey wasn't really interested in me doing that because they said it could mess up the homicide trial. So that wasn't done. So there was no charges in Brevard in Transylvania County. And no charges, to my knowledge, in Hendersonville. It was just only by the SBI. And it was for manslaughter for 2 of them.
Who was the second one?
Coley Hall.
I thought you said he didn't get charged.
He didn't. It was the SBI and the Sheriff's Department recommended them get involuntary manslaughter. And he only charged Scott Fisher with involuntary manslaughter and didn't charge Coley with anything.
And the DA has discretion on pressing charges or not. That's something we need to change in this state. He shouldn't have discretion. You murder somebody, you murdered them. That's capital crime.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why there's no statute of limitation. But how do you do it when you get DAs, 2 of them, to look at it and they're stuff like that? I'm not interested now.
If they have the power to do that, then they have judicial immunity on top of that. So you have no recourse to even get justice if the DA decides that your son's a criminal and you're a conspiracy theorist or something.
Right. We all know you are.
And I think one thing that is big here, and I think we will get into this in future episodes more, is that you should be able to turn to the Attorney General when the district attorneys aren't doing their jobs. And the attorney generals are just like, oh, no, my hands are tied, there's nothing I can do. And it's like, what's your job then?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They send out a form letter because I was speaking to that fella that we talked to the other day, and he got the same exact letter from the attorney general that I did. Sorry, but we don't have any jurisdiction.
And that's what they told another person we'll have on the podcast really soon about her son was, oh, there's nothing we can do.
I've got 2 letters from 2 different attorney generals.
I've actually sent out a petition with the murder of my brother and had people sending in letters to him with no response, or like you said,
form letter. So it has to change. After my kids were killed, people told me, I bet you over 10 or 15 people that people have always said, if you want to murder somebody, Transylvania County is the place to do it. It's happening too much. And it happens too often. And the thing is that after all the trouble we went through to get Greg Newman taken out, and we got a new DA, how many people have been murdered since he started? Well, the guy that got killed by the cops in the parking lot, the Panther, the guy that killed his girlfriend and told the DA it was a Panther in the town of Hendersonville.
Mm-hmm.
The girl from Polk County, and that was also, this case was with the new DA, and it took them months to get anything done.
Mm-hmm.
They strung them along for over a year, and then they charged him with involuntary manslaughter, and he got 15 months? But it was involuntary manslaughter, but he had court-ordered domestic violence classes and court-ordered anger management classes. Now, how's that? It twists my head. It's like, how's that logical? Why, if it's involuntary, why has he got to take domestic violence classes, and why's he got to take anger management?
Right.
And there was a history of domestic violence. He kills her.
Mm-hmm.
He's out in 12 months, and her family has to look at him the rest of their life.
Yeah, he gets to go on with the rest of his life.
So it hasn't stopped. It's just gotten worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we're switching to Hendersonville to be the place to murder somebody now, because it really looks like that's what's happening.
It's anywhere in North Carolina at this point.
And Mahoney gets over $5,000 a month in retirement for Transylvania County, and now he's taking chief deputy position in Henderson County. He's milking North Carolina.
Judge Poole got to keep his retirement.
So did Greg Newman.
Because they said, Judge Poole's like, oh yeah, he was exploiting women. He was trading lesser sentences for sexual favors. But he had dementia, and it was only 10 years. So we're going to let him keep his retirement.
That's what they did with Newman.
If he had dementia, and I feel like we're going off on a thing here, but if he had dementia for 10 years, every single case he touched for 10 years needs to be looked at.
District attorney is the victim's attorney. He is there to take care of the victims.
Mm-hmm.
The district attorney takes care of the criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it over and over and over again. And
well, and not only the criminals, but the cops that are involved that are into some shady stuff, or corruption.
What's astounding to me, though, and kind of to take it back to Barbara's case with her son, what's so astounding is that district attorneys love easy wins. A man that I talked to today, I was telling him, they want an easy win. Of course you want an easy win. Of course
it's all about their record.
Yeah, and you want to be able to say, especially when you run for re-election as a district attorney, you want to be able to say, hey, I convicted this many people, or I found, I got this many murderers off the street, or whatever. So what kills me when there are easy cases to win?
Mm-hmm.
Like in Barbara's case, there were 2 eyewitnesses. You don't always have an eyewitness. Sometimes the only thing you have is circumstantial evidence. There was 2 eyewitnesses.
And were those 2 eyewitnesses called into court to testify, Barbara? No.
But yeah, it was so you've got 2 eyewitnesses. You don't get that very often.
Right. That should have been an easy win.
That is an easy win.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 2 people.
But they're so worried about losing that they're going to go ahead and plea bargain and plea it down.
But listen, Murray is not looking at running again. The man's my age. He's fixing to retire, and he's going to leave out of there with his big retirement check, and he's going to say he doesn't give a dang about his reputation.
What I'm trying to get at is, okay, Alec Murdaugh was, convicted last year. There was less evidence. Not that he didn't deserve to be. There was plenty of evidence against him, but there was less evidence than, and he was found guilty for killing his wife and his son. But there was less evidence than what Barbara had for the people that killed Michael,
mm-hmm.
because there were 2 eyewitnesses.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't eyewitnesses. For Alec to get convicted, it was his phone data which got him convicted. And again, I 100% believe he did it. He 100% deserved. I'm not trying to defend the man.
No.
I'm just saying that that's one of the big cases that a lot of people are going to know about. And there was less evidence to convict him than what Barbara had to get
the problem
her
with
son's murders convicted.
Small towns like Transylvania County, everybody's somebody's cousin. So the fact that one got charged and the other didn't, there's some connection with the sheriff's department. In almost every case that I've investigated, studied, advocated for, there is a relative on the sheriff's department, which is another mistake. Mm-hmm. Asheville, years ago, when we lived there, the policy was that they would not hire any deputies from the town of Asheville because they didn't want them to have any connection.
Well, we just want to thank you guys for joining us, and please, there's Mountain Justice on Facebook. You can follow us on there.
And if you would like to continue to get more episodes, and for these episodes to reach more people so that maybe we can bring justice for Michael and other victims within North Carolina, please give us a 5-star rating and review and share our podcast.
And press like.
That's it. We're done. As you heard in the episode, only one of Michael Rogers' murderers was brought to any kind of justice, and he served less than 2 years. The other person involved in his murder, Coley Hall, was never charged or convicted in the murder of Michael Rogers. It is our hope that by sharing this story, we can put media pressure on Western North Carolina to bring Michael Rogers' murderer to justice. Because of double jeopardy, Scott Fisher can never be retried in Michael's murder. Through A Few Good People podcast, we aim to share the stories of individual victims and spark meaningful conversations about crime and corruption and social justice within our community. By amplifying these voices and shedding light on hidden truths, we hope to inspire positive change and pave the way for a more just and equitable society. Join us as we delve into the heart of darkness, uncovering untold stories and shedding light on the path to justice. Together, we can make a difference and ensure the voices of victims are heard and honored.